Yeah, could you introduce
Introduce
yourself to
yourself.
our audience?
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you guys for being here. This is Noor Barakat. I'm a social and environmental researcher. I previously did my internship at the G20 Global Land Initiative, so I'm very happy to be here today. I'm also currently completing my master's of science in geography of environmental risks and human security here in Bonn. I've had some experience as an independent researcher and consultant working on different development projects, including urbanization and climate adaptation to climate change, as well as land restoration. So, without further ado, thank you for this space, and I'm very excited for the discussion today.
Great, thanks so much for introducing yourself, Noor. Uh, we also have two speakers today for the future of food systems. First, we have Gabriel Lambert, who is a longtime agronomist and advisor to the Deputy Executive Secretary of the UNCCD. So I would like to give Gabriel the floor. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and your relation to our topic today.
Do you hear me? Okay, great. So, hello everyone. My name is Gabriel. I'm working at the UNCCD as the advisor to the Deputy Executive Secretary. I've started my international career in the Middle East, where I worked a lot in agricultural water management in Palestine, Jordan, and Lebanon. Then I continued my journey with agricultural water management, more oriented towards agricultural social water management, supporting water user association also in the Middle East, in North Africa, and in Southeast Asia. And I joined the UNCCD in 2023 as the advisor to the Deputy Executive Secretary, and I'm coordinating and supporting her work in many cross-cutting issues, and currently coordinating the COP17 action agenda that will entail and comprise a Food System and Soil Health Day. Over to you.
Thanks, Gabriel. We also have another speaker from Utrecht. Maarten Klop is with us. He is a local organizer and founder of the Grounded community. He also does some work with CommonSource, but I will let him explain all of that. Please introduce yourself and please help us understand why you're here today to talk about food system.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sabrina. And first of all, I'm thrilled to see the amount of people turning up for the Generation Restoration dialogues. That's a good sign. Definitely started saying that it's going to take people from all walks of life to help make eco and social systems thrive. My name is Maarten. I work on food, people, and nature on hyperlocal, regional, and international levels. I got into all of this work during my studies in environmental sciences. There, I found a lot of bad news that we're facing as a world and a lot of scary graphs. And it wasn't until midway my studies that I started working with local farmers and actually started to learn a lot about the solutions. So I found food as something to really connect my love and interest, like many of here in the audience probably, for people and nature. So that set me on a path where over the last 8 years, one hyper locally, we founded the Grounded community, an organization which started with the ambition to make social and ecological topics something fun and include everyone. So we started by organizing festivals with this mission, and over 8 years' time, this has grown to be an incredibly diversely skilled and self-organizing community with hundreds of volunteers, tens of different nationalities. We have our home base on an old military fortress with a small urban garden, kitchen, workplace, and activities and events throughout the year. Naturally, the topic of food never left me. So regionally, I've been working at CommonSource to organize regional food systems, connecting farmers and people in the city to co-create projects like short food supply chains, community kitchens, food forest, land restoration initiatives. And then the last layer is that I do believe it's real local action we need as the only place where we can address ecological or social topics. But of course, it needs to happen everywhere all at once. And while we're getting going to set up all these kind of initiatives, there's so much to learn. So at CommonSource, we've also been working at international collaborations, and we like to call it a learning ecosystem of local action. So through this, also working with many leaders and both global thought leaders, but also local community leaders, and coming together on shared challenges in that. So that's how I'm spending my time: food, people, and nature, hyper locally with the grounded community, regionally and organizing the food works, and internationally learning with others that are doing the same. So happy to meet more people here.
Great. Thank you for that introduction to yourself, Maarten. So I wanted to first, to those of us joining the Generation Restoration Dialogues for the first time, I wanted to introduce this to everyone. So this is a series of monthly webinars hosted by the UNCCD, the G20 Global Land Initiative team. We are a global initiative that aims to reduce degraded land by 50% by 2040. I hope you all have a chance later on to visit our website at g20land.org. There you can sign up for our newsletter to learn more about our activities. And of course, be sure to follow us on social media for updates on this monthly dialogue. As I said, it happens monthly. So there will be another one and other events. We will also put that in the chat for you. Now, you may have surmised, both from the title of this webinar and from our just recent introductions, that we will be discussing food systems, which is the leading driver of land degradation globally. And I mean, we all think about food every day, but we're probably not considering the impact of the way we produce and consume food while we're enjoying our meals. A quarter of all degraded land worldwide is actually abandoned farmland, and soil degradation makes nutritious diets less affordable for millions around the world. And even beyond that, if you think about rangelands, they support nearly 2 billion people across the globe. They are under enormous stress from unsustainable food production practices, and it's not something we can really ignore. With COP17 coming up this August with UNCCD, food systems and soil health will be a key focus on one of the action days. So this conversation feels especially timely. And with that, we'll pivot into a bit of the discussion with our speakers so that we can understand the full weight of the issues we're dealing with. I want to prompt our audience that while we're having this discussion with our speakers, there is a Q&A box. I invite everyone in the audience to send your own questions in the box, and we will have a dedicated session just to answer those questions after this main chat with our speakers. Yeah. Now, I'd like to pose this first question to Gabriel and Maarten to set our background and set some context, if you're ready for it. All right, so the first question is, what are the challenges and consequences of the way we produce food today? And what exactly does it mean for the already declining health of our land and soils?
You want to go first, Gabriel?
No, I was going to ask you the same question. Please go.
Well, I guess the big consequences right now, industrial farming is farming against nature, and it's taking heaps of energy and effort to keep that going. And you see that, of course, the pesticides, the fertilizers that are being used are trying to keep nature's functions at bay, which is incredibly sad because it's those same natural functions that can make sure that we have healthy plants, nutritionally dense food, more pest resistance in crops. But I think some of the biggest impacts are of chemical use, like Roundup, the monocultures. And I think it is at the same time depleting our earth systems, but it's also heavily undermining our own gut and thus all-round health. So I think the way we are farming right now, it is giving us a monoculture production, and with that, severe impacts on environmental, but also on our human health.
Would you like to add to that, Gabriel?
Well, you've said a lot of things, Maarten.
Sure.
But also Sabrina, also just to and on the main purpose also that the global food demand will increase by 50% up to 2050. So that's one of the challenges as well. Is of course how we foresee the food production in a sustainable manner, but also being in a capacity to provide sufficient healthy food. And that's also a very important thing, like healthy food and balanced diet for everyone. So that's one of the challenge we foresee. And this will not be possible if we continue the way the farming and farming systems are not transforming. That is very clear. In addition to what you said, Sabrina, yeah, food system is something, but land is also bearing, of course, the food, but also the fibers and many other things that is very useful for the human communities. Clothing, fibers, cotton, linen, whatever that is produced, often in rangelands, by rangelands communities, is also very instrumental. So yes, that's the challenge there. And that's where the UNCCD as the solely legally binding treaty that is dealing with land and drought is important. That's the COP is the supreme body of the convention that deal with the decision making, and that's where we can try to impulse some of the dynamics to the decision makers on these things. And the challenge is huge, but we can see positive elements. Last COP16 in Riyadh was the first time that the notion of agricultural land degradation and restoration was mentioned that way and labeled that way. That's where during that text negotiation, the role of smallholder farming being the stewards of land and agricultural production has been clearly mentioned, and where the importance of soil health also has been raised. And that's a very important topic that we will be discussing a bit later. That, yeah, land is a thing, land restoration is super important, but guaranteeing and preserving soil health is also very crucial in here. And it links also the other environmental conventions together. Healthy land is a factor of food production, of course, because it entails biodiversity. That's also very important. Without a good level of biodiversity in your soil, you'll not achieve anything. And it's a very important bit of carbon sequestration. So that links all the three element conventions together. That makes it like more, quite synergetic. So land and soil is and food systems is one of the main connector of these three Rio conventions. So that's the challenge, but we foresee some good elements there, positive elements, as I said on the last COP16 decision on soil on agricultural land restoration, as well as seeing food system transformation getting a lot of political traction here. So we, as at the UNCCD, we should take this advantage of this dynamic and work that way.
Mm-hmm.
Over.
Can to add a little bit to that, still both on the urgency and perhaps a little bit on the hope. I think what we're seeing also is that our global food system at the moment, it's in a way very vulnerable. We know that very actively right now with the Strait of Hormuz continuing to be closed, and indeed fertilizers are in shortage, the food prices are rising, all the costs of producing food in the industrial way are just really skyrocketing, making food accessibility an issue. So, you feel like there's a bit of a shaking in the global food system, and perhaps that also creates opportunities for looking at regionalizing our food systems and also the regional economic opportunities that come with that for people to find work. And I think that is also a real hopeful approach in combining ecological restoration with regenerative agriculture, that it creates a lot of opportunities and economic incentives as well for people to work along, etc. So it feels like an interesting moment for food systems. Let's put it like that.
Definitely. And I think, again, this is the perfect time to be having this conversation. Did you have something you wanted to say in response to that, Gabriel?
No, good.
No? All right, then I wanted to go back to what Maarten, you said about pesticides, and Gabriel, you mentioned soil health and its impact on healthy, nutritious output for food and also plants that we cultivate for our linens and clothing. In considering the increase of demand in coming years, what practical steps do you think can be taken to prepare for this increased demand while also reducing waste? I know waste is also a big problem.
Well, I mean, waste is just a matter out of place, of course. In natural systems, there is no waste. There is only a resource for the next step. But to start with your original question, what kind of opportunities are there? What could we move towards? I think it's very interesting, and I'm based in the Netherlands, and we very often hear this saying, we have to feed the world. Well, I truly believe that the world can feed itself through localized production everywhere, and in this implementing regenerative practices that are looking at lower inputs and lower costs, and through supporting the natural functions of soil biology, so the making available of nutrients to plants through a diverse soil microbiome of microbes, the mycorrhizal network, it allows you actually to create more and more abundance. And we see these patches of examples where people are able to grow incredible amounts of foods in market gardens, food forests, etc. The challenge, though, is that these cannot really latch on to the distribution infrastructure as we have set it up at the moment for our globalized food systems. So I think there is a real approach that we can look at the more local demand, also working, for example, from the demand of cities, mapping and measuring that demand to then influence the production on the land. So when we start to more directly connect the people that eat the food and what they need with the people that produce the food, we can take the risk out of it and we can see what is already possible locally and start to have different ways of distributing that. And that goes for food, that goes for other services like water storage. I mean, functional ecosystems, I don't fully like to call them services, but also for products, for example, for bio-based building, for linen, etc. So I think it is about connecting different sectors and understanding the demand to then really collectively design production on the land and seeing what's possible locally and what do we then still need to exchange. So I think there sits a really big opportunity, and it's partly social processes of building trust and making these agreements, but there's also supporting technologies to be able to administer these agreements and effect-based rewards, for example, just as a start to the solutions.
Yeah, you said it. You've covered also a lot of points. Yeah, the importance of the different sustainable agricultural approaches. You've named some of them. Regenerative agriculture, agroforestry, agroecology, and others. This is things that also can be practically supported also within such processes like the UNCCD ones. We have the science policy interface that is one of the body of the UNCCD that is also making sure that any type of decision is science supported, and that's very important just to demonstrate also and to make the case that, I mean, of course, what you said, Maarten, bringing of course the social components and the ecosystem component is very important, but and it has to be linked and hooked to the political processes that is also driving some of the changes. And if you have, of course, sounded science decisions that are made, that's also contribute to the development emergence of these elements. Again, I'm referring, and you will hear me referring a lot to this decision 19 of the last COP on agricultural land restoration, where also a strong focus has been put on diversification of crops. And again, going out and from this like main 4 crops that were supported during agricultural and green revolutions that made that maize, wheat, and rice and others as one of the main crops cultivated in the world. But there is some important quite some importance to give back to the locally grown crops that are supporting a lot, of course, nutrients and diet base for the population, but also going back into this virtuous cycle of things that are produced locally, traded locally, and so on and so forth. So that's very important to insist on those elements. In the UNCCD, there is this political process, and since last COP, we've developed this action agenda that is also trying to convene on the margin of the COP, of course, decision makers, but also the non-state actors at large, to hear their voice also on local and practical solutions that can be showcased during those in parallel of this negotiation tracks that is happening. And the Food System and Soil Health Day will, and like the other days, and I can elaborate a bit further later on, is focusing on that, of course, bringing the non-state actors' vision and showcasing very interesting initiatives that are happening in that sense. I shall not mention, and we may have a diverging point here, Maarten, on the private sector involvement. Of course, being cautious of some of the of greenwashing process, but some of initiatives that are bear by the private sector can be also quite instrumental in making the change. And there are some very interesting initiatives where private companies are trying to enter into this win-win situation where, of course, they do seek of their own interest, but as well as supporting in a very interesting manner the farmers' communities in investing in sustainable practices. Should it be again regenerative agriculture, agroecology, agroforestry? I have plenty of examples of companies that are doing such things that were invited in our last COP that showcased how they're engaging with farmers' communities, and that's a very good, also good examples, and a fraction of the actors out there that needs to be on board with us. And that's, we do see an interest in having them and trying to develop together what could be beneficial for farmers and their own business, and trying to make the future a bit better than what it is today.
Fantastic. I think it's actually really interesting that we're both on the panel here, where I think you have a bit more overview of what's going on in the more governmental, institutional, and perhaps private sector world. And we've been much more just on the ground, bottom-up organizing. And I truly believe that both needs to happen. It needs to happen everywhere on all scales, outside in and inside out. And I thought it would just be interesting to mention some of the practical examples of things we've developed in Utrecht. Because one element is that we started, that was by now almost 8 years ago, we set up one short food supply chain that was called Local to Local. And we started from the farmer network. So we got 5 existing farmer collectives, put all the information on one logistics and IT platform, and we thought, okay, let's go feed the city. Well, then we, of course, encountered all kinds of institutional barriers to working with the big catering companies with our local farming collectives. Another challenge was that then Corona just hit. Interesting, though, to give alarm, perhaps because also I think the topic of resilience is very important. Because we had organized with the farmers and the logistics and information already beforehand, we were able to switch in a matter of weeks from a setup to deliver business to business to supplying more than 50,000 families with emergency food packages at the start of Corona. So I think really these farmers are key when it comes to organizing resilience. Of course, food resilience, but in many other ways as well when it comes to flood risks or other elements. So that was an experience of going from the farmers into the city and trying to link in with the bigger corporates and catering companies. Then another example is, because I always work from bottom up in the regions, we say it's like our own human mycelium, first mapping what's in the soil, what can everybody contribute, what are we looking for, and then based on that, co-creating solutions. And one of the things we set up was a community kitchen on the science campus. And there we got to give it a free space to do what we thought would work. And actually, we managed to, in a pilot of 4 months' time, prove that we could serve local, more fresh, and more affordable food in a student-driven kitchen, products coming from the farmers, so getting the products accessible on the campus. And at the same time, it was like a point where motivated students would latch on, be like, hey, what are you doing? And they would connect back to working on the farms. And our approach is always to do it in a non-prescriptive way, like you cannot do this or you must do that, but just taking people on a experiential journey and showing that this is also just more fun, more healthy, more beautiful landscapes. So something that evolved from these connections as well is a program which we run throughout the summer, which starts with a ecological festival and then followed with ecological summer camps, where we take the people from the university and throughout the city to go work on lands with farmers. And the connections that have emerged from that and new initiatives coming up has just been absolutely beautiful. So we noted that because we got a bit of free space, we could be a lot more flexible in, saying working with the unwashed potatoes, because you can only get washed potatoes when you have big volumes, etc. And that then again is influencing how they're thinking about the future of food provision on campus. And this has now been taken on to a fully student-driven initiative going on for a longer time. So I think this is an interesting case of how these more bottom-up and institutional things are coming together, and you see a slow change happening there.
Yeah, and just to complement, in my past experiences, the last 15 years, well, before UNCCD, I worked mainly in supporting farmers' organizations, water user associations that are farmer cooperatives globally dealing with water resources. So, and one of the main constraints I faced while supporting them in the ground was, okay, yeah, how these political or let's say institutional spheres, they don't communicate well and they don't have the same framework of operation, and how we break the barriers to make sure that everybody's understand each other. That has been very instrumental. And of course, locally, there is tons of solutions and goodwill, and not even goodwill, just very simple basic facts that are super logic to be implemented. And that's where, I mean, pragmatism is one of the main characteristics of farmers, I would say. That's also how this type of political process can try to better understand how this is working at a farmers community level, just to make sure that there is a clear understanding and everything is done in a smart way to try to create this enabling environment. Because as you said, there are tons of opportunities when you have, like, I don't know, an agricultural area that is very nearby a city. There is like a consumption basket there that is super evident, super obvious. And it's very rare that when farmers, they manage to access and enter in this short cycle value chain where they can just go and deliver their own stuff to the city that is nearby. It goes for the university canteen, food canteen. I've worked school canteens. I've worked a lot also in that aspect, where there is a lot of potential and opportunity there that is to be further encouraged. So yeah, those are the elements, but I will talk later at the end maybe on how this food system day will be shaping and how we could engage more with and bring all these stakeholders together to try to build together this narrative for a better future.
Very good. I'm going to say one more thing and then I'll let you get on with the following up questions, Sabrina. Because just what you're saying, how do you get the hyper local solutions? That's where it happens. But how do we effectively learn and co-create between regions so that if something works, it can be scaled and shared without falling in the traditional trap of IP and exploitation of that knowledge in a way? And I also saw a question in the chat going by, like, are there initiatives coming forth from Africa as well that will be in this series? And I just want to mention that one of the approaches that we take is we look at regions as if they are living laboratories. And within that, you have community nodes, farmers, etc., that are working in a region, trying to co-create solutions for healthier living, energy, food, etc. And when we follow a similar process on the ground of inspiring with events, activating and mapping what is there and seeing what are the solutions that emerge, we can also come together on shared challenges between regions. So we've started within several European projects to establish a network of living labs in Europe. But this is now also expanding through Asia and Africa. And let me also just say that we can learn a lot from the innovations and the work being done in Africa as well. So I feel like it allows us to learn at living speed, where we're all doing our best on the ground. And we've all got different solutions and stages of development. So some things will be faster to develop in Europe, for example, some things faster in Africa. So the ability to come together in an equal manner on a shared challenge, and it's like an incidental, effective-based collaboration makes sense, merging our capacities, coming up with the best solution, and then sharing it so it can be implemented locally everywhere again.
Great. No, that's a great conversation we just had. I want to ask one more question before we head off to the audience Q&A, because we do have quite a few in there. And then I would also like Gabriel to please kind of go through the COP17 Action Day discussions first. But if you both could maybe answer quickly, how exactly do you promote these initiatives to the average person to help them become engaged in their own local communities and to help solve this problem? Because I know that's a big challenge.
It is a big challenge indeed. Pretty hard question, to be honest, to answer to. There are many angles where you can see that you may have environmental supporters that would like to see better food being produced. And of course, that's a way of engagement. Some others that would see an economic benefit in engaging in such activities, because those are profitable activities when it's properly managed and done. You can decently live from that. And of course, being mindful of being in a virtuous environment is something very, very important as well for those who have children. I mean, passing over a lively, sane, and decent environment is something very important for me, for example. That's something that I want my kids to evolve in an environment I want my kids to evolve in. So that there are many other ways. Should you be more versed into politics? That's also a very good way to engage, because you may consider that politics and political action might be instrumental in that regard. There are many examples as well where politics have been instrumental in changing some of the systems. Not everywhere in the world, but it could be a way to do it. So yeah, I'm passing the floor to Maarten, and then I will answer the question on the COP17 maybe.
Fantastic. Yes, I think this is the main thing actually that we've been working on in many different ways. So let me share our local experience, but then also how I see this more as a global movement developing. And what we've noted is indeed, let's make things fun and positive and actionable. So taking people step by step into this story. And I think food in this is a great way. Like you say, we all need food. We all want our children to have the healthiest food. So it's also taking it out of like is this a left or a right topic kind of thing? It's about food. And I think that's quite a universal thing to take people along into. So we always say first start with the inspiration. So at our events, dinners, food trucks, the community kitchen, people can have, we just say, hey, this is delicious. And then when they're like, oh yeah, tell me more, we can take them along from, oh, but it's produced in this way from those farms. Activate them. There's a volunteer day happening at the farm. Go there, touch the soil, harvest the vegetable. And then you note when people have got their hands in the soil, all of a sudden their minds are open. And then they start to ask questions. Well, could I learn something more about this? Is there a course that I could follow? Can I go visit another site? And you see people to learn and experience more. And I think it's really important that we also start to think about the next step. And maybe I'm speaking very much from the perspective of a young people's journey here, but I think it goes for many people. The next step, when you have experienced, learned, etc., how can you also find work or other way to get a secure livelihood while you're working on these good topics. So I think that's a bit of deepening levels of engagement. And I think I always say, and I find it a relaxing thought for myself as well, that luckily this movement is moving and it has been for decades. And there's all these inspiring projects on the ground. I mean, there's thousands of regenerative farms, eco villages, ecosystem restoration communities. And I see them all as like little islands of hope. And I think what we can all work on together is, on the one hand, the mass inspiration, showing people it's possible, it's happening through festivals, public speaking, documentaries, and with the goal, getting people to these local community spots, farms, etc., for mass participation, experience it, touch a soil, grow a veggie, help out in the kitchen, and then how can we, underneath all these initiatives, have a shared knowledge and data infrastructure to facilitate the onboarding, matchmaking, and in a way, the social processes and tools to facilitate the limitless collaboration, pulling people into this network and helping to co-create the best solutions that support all these local people that are leading the charge and have been for a long time in their efforts for planetary restoration. So I think it's about a journey of engagement that starts just with something that is fun, delicious, and that you want to be a part of.
Yeah, I would also add the importance of education here. I mean, educating children at a very young age is fairly important. The UNCCD is based in Germany, and my kids at some point they went to the German school, and quite, I would say, not from the regular system, and they were asked to crop and to grow their own, I mean, pieces of land for a year, and that's a very important thing that they have been doing, and that is not commonly done in the other educational systems, and that is super interesting. And I just to make the point on the importance of education on this topic, on many others, of course, but on this topic is fairly important, because that's where you plant the seeds at the very beginning. That's one of the, and I would also insist on the point you made, Maarten, on experimenting things. We will, I mean, there are many, I mean, the appetite to experiment and try things and maybe fail, but succeed to some extent is very important. I mean, we cannot just apply this solution at a large scale from scratch, or starting from zero, and to be successful at once. It will need a great deal of adaptation, adjustment, and flexibility there, and trying. And I truly believe that trying and experimenting things mixed with this pragmatism of farming communities will make things very, very interesting and successful at the end.
Thanks so much for answering. Speaking of planting seeds, though, Gabriel, if you'd like to give us a kind of preview now of COP17 right before we head off into our Q&A, I would love to hear what the discussion will be on that action day.
Yeah, so the UNCCD COP17 will be happening the last 2 weeks of August in Mongolia, very important country for rangelands and pastoralists. Most of the 2 weeks of the COP, and that's the COP process, and that's the Secretariat of the UNCCD's mandate, is to support the negotiation happening. So we convene 197 countries that are party of to the convention to negotiate on different texts. Should it be related of the Secretariat work by itself, but also community and science and technology body, or a review of the implementation of the previous text that were adopted. So parties are gathering and they will negotiate. In parallel, we are organizing this action agenda that is structured around 4 thematic days. One will be on finance, because that's also a very important driver here. How do we mobilize finance to accelerate the action on the ground? And that's a very important element here. How do we structure, how do we attract financiers, public money, private money as well in supporting the implementation of the UNCCD mandate on land restoration, agricultural land restoration, and drought management. So first day will be the Finance Day on August 24. Then August 25 will be Water Day, a day that will be related to water and drought resilience building. There will be a lot of events here, including some ministerial dialogues, but also other events related to, let me check and making sure that I'm not telling mistakes. There will be some, we'll address the drought resilience, the land-water nexus. That's also a very important element there, because water cannot be treated alone. As any other things, water, land, food, energy nexus has to be dealt to, not to get together, but I mean in an integrated manner. We'll address also some elements related to drought resilience, should it be through investment facilities or different partnerships. And then this day will be followed by Land and People Day, where a lot of focus will be put on land restoration and rangelands restoration. That's also very important. You've mentioned it earlier, on the importance of nature-based solution that to support the process on sustainable land management practices. Will address youth and gender topics, as well as international IPLCs, local communities, and indigenous people, a role in this agenda. That's, I'm sorry, I've missed some elements I wanted to say before. It will come back with time. And then the Food System Day will have a strong focus on healthy soils. And that's one of the main outcome of the last COP, that, land restoration, agricultural land restoration, but also transformation of food system will be achievable through healthy soils, of course, going with that healthy foods and others. So we'll address agricultural land restoration, agricultural productivity and crop diversification in a sustainable manner, of course. The importance of farmers' communities and their role in the value chains, and this has how we see the right balance and linkages with the private sector. Of course, we'll try to address agricultural finance and the synergies across the Rio Conventions. That, as I said earlier, that land and agriculture and food systems are a real connector across these Rio Conventions bodies. But more than that, we'll also address how we, at national and region and subnational levels, we should have a better and integrated coordination, because often the UNCCD is dealing with ministries of environment, and how do ministries of environment and Ministry of Agriculture, but also subnational entities, regional offices, and so on, they do collaborate together to reach their own objectives. So that's one of the things that will be happening. So we will have a high-level dialogue, bringing different ministers of agriculture and ministers of environment together, alongside with financial institutions, to see how all of this could interconnect and yield some results. The process of the action agenda in general, and the thematic days, I've mentioned them, is also to try to infuse into the political process. The action agenda and the thematic days are not politically oriented at all, but how raising these discussions across different stakeholders can try to raise the attention and the awareness of the importance of this or that other sub-items into the process. So that's what the UNCCD is doing as a political treaty, supporting the negotiation process. Facilitating, making sure that this negotiation process is happening across the parties, and that's where that's the main topic and objective of the thematic days, is to accelerate the actions in the ground. Political decisions, when they are well designed and taken, are super fine, but they have to be translated into concrete actions, and that's what the thematic days are trying to do.
Great, thank you for that answer. I'm glad you mentioned all of the thematic days, because we are actually doing these thematic days as our next webinar topics. So today is food systems. Next, in June, we will have water and drought. We will also have land after that and finance. So I hope everyone tunes into that when they come. Now we would like to get to those audience Q&A section. So I want to turn things over to our co-host, Noor. I know our audience has been filling up our question box.
Yes, thank you, Sabrina, and thank you to everyone for putting in your questions and your comments. We've seen them all. Thank you to our speakers for your very thorough insights. So I would like to first off start by jumping off the idea that Gabriel, you mentioned about bringing stakeholders together, and also Maarten about learning from each other in living speed by merging some of the questions that were asked together. So first off, who bears the responsibility in this global issue, this global challenge, and what mechanisms can we use to hold countries accountable for natural restoration? For example, things like the Kyoto Protocol or the Paris Agreement, which are used in UNFCCC processes. And on the same note, what frameworks can we use to track restoration progress? So feel free to
So I
jump
guess
in.
that one is for me.
You start. We'll be
Yeah. Well, in many ways, and there was a lot of elements in the question. Well, the countries that are parties to the convention, they can voluntarily report to their progress in the convention. So that's also the role of the UNCCD to try to see how we could make the reporting easier, better, and making sure that we can track things down. The question, I will not enter this question on the protocol and how do we make these things mandatory, but just bear in mind that, I mean, any decisions that is taken within the UNCCD process is a legally binding decision at the country level. So that's the process. So each time a decision is taken, a country should be, I mean, is accountable for a decision that has been anonymously passed. So that's the beauty and the or maybe the weak point, because when you have to reach like a common agreement on the decision that everybody has to agree on the decision room, of course it has to, that's the, I mean, it's the fact that everybody has to agree and there is no, it's not a consensus, it's that everybody has to agree. So then maybe sometimes you decrease a little bit or the importance of the text, but at least when it's taken and it's done, it is legally binding. So the countries, they have to translate this taken agreement into their national framework, I would say. So that's where that's how you can, and then countries are accountable for that. So that's what they can be done at the UNCCD level. And then the question of protocol, I'm not sufficiently informed or specialist in that to tell you, but yeah, that's the way we are working at the UNCCD, supporting countries to make reporting, trying to support also and identifying some reliable metrics that countries could report on. So that's the things that we are trying to do. That's the science policy interface, as well as the science technology and innovative instrument unit we're having at the UNCCD, trying to promote that.
It's very, very interesting. So I'll again share a bit more from the local and regional experiences, and I always try to challenge both our community members and regional partners with words like, that we in the end are architects of our own life, and we can organize the high quality of life if we organize it together here regionally on food, energy, housing. But that process to organize it together, that always takes time. So we know that from first organizing regionally bottom up, so that means mapping first what is there, what every partner can give and is looking for to the ecosystem. And then when we have a question, so I always take the metaphor of we are the underground movement, this is our human mycelial network. If we have a question of something to create, like can we create a community kitchen? Can we create a bio-based building project? The plant has its roots in that bottom-up network and first brings together all the elements that are there already. And I always say, bring together what's there, strengthen and connect what works, and then let's co-create and look for support to see what's missing. And every single time we tend to see that we have 80% of the solution in the bottom-up network. That means the physical things, right? Access to land, to people that want to do the work with their hands, to knowledge, to information on impact measurements, to reach, to data. So it's events, so real, what is this things that we have already? And usually that is 80%. And then we look to more the top-down world to support this plant in growing. And we see, what do we need? What is this last 20%? Well, often we are looking for a little bit of sunshine and a little bit of rain to make our solution grow. And in this metaphor, I'm sure perhaps you can guess, the rain is some funding and the sunshine is attention. And that sometimes also has to do with breaking through, for example, a current legal barrier or creating a zone or a permit or something like that. And I think that functions on a regional level, but we can also look at this interregionally when the topics get bigger. And perhaps in this way, we also take a little bit of responsibility to help our governments and institutes who are massive problem holders in a way, but don't have the rootedness on the ground and the steering mechanisms and overview to be able to direct. But so sometimes I talk to the institutions locally and I say, well, maybe the role is first to wait and listen to what are the help questions and what is still needed to then be able to effectively give some sunshine and give some water. So I think the responsibility sits everywhere. And I'm always just in the approach of let's not wait and let's start going, maybe work from the assumption that no one is coming to save us. But I think in a way you need these both, the bottom up and the top down, to help each other and both very much take responsibility in this.
Thank you both. And thank you, Maarten, for this very interesting metaphor. And interestingly, it captures the remainder of our questions very well. We've had a lot of questions specifically about funding and also specifically about representation. So in other words, about the rain and the sun in this metaphor. So I'd like to start to ask you actually both these questions. So first off, why are there challenges to funding that can be felt throughout different regions, specifically pertaining to food sovereignty and land restoration? And do you have any advice about overcoming these obstacles to financial resources? And on the other hand, regarding attention, how can we ensure the representation of indigenous farmers, local farmers, farmers' unions in international forums and in regional contexts where a lot of times representation is dealt with by the government or by a central representative?
Okay, I think I'm gonna start with answering a piece of that. I don't think I have all the answers to this question, but also the earlier question you asked about the learning at living speed, and then how do you fund these processes? And just sharing an example, like right now I am over at Furnace Brook Ecosystem Restoration Community in the UK, and bringing along the experiences that we've had in the Netherlands of community building and regional food system organizing. One of these experiences is how do you activate and mobilize and also in a way keep the momentum going without waiting on the institutional or governmental funding. And one thing we're approaching here is that what we've done in the Netherlands as well is launching impact products on a pre-sales approach. So right now at this restoration community, we are working to clean a severe water pollution incident with ecological interventions like wetlands, reeds, floating water gardens. And it's been quite slow to get the institutional support from that. So rather than wait, we've come up with launching a Clean the Lake lager, which is a beer, and the profits of which will be used to fund these restoration efforts. Like in the Netherlands, we've done this with, we need to save the pear harvest. We make a pear vodka. We need to make more herbs in the region. We made a kombucha with more herbs. So something practical, a message in a bottle that mobilize people, but also brings in a little bit of cash flow. Because what I've noticed is very important is that the soft leaders, that to organize these networks, that's usually not being funded whatsoever. But when that process is there, you start to get an overview of, wow, collectively we have a lot of resources and collectively a lot more strength to ask help from more top-down institutions as well. So it bridges that gap. And then on the wave of uh, these products and the excitement, we send out a food inventory tool. So asking people, what do you eat? What are your needs? And how can you engage and contribute? Can you share this? Can you be a pickup point? And that gives a lot of information and data. So on our science campus, we had thousands and thousands of people fill this in. And like 50% of the people who said, well, yeah, if there's a local vegetable box from local farmers, I would buy that. A lot of students filled in, yeah, I want to volunteer at farms. And there were a lot of people that were even willing to invest into farms to fund the transition. Well, when you have that information, then you have something to go with to farmers to look like, look, there is this demand. Can we fill that in? So it's always a bit of a demand-driven approach and a bit a way to get in self-funding. And then on the bigger challenges, a bigger support network to engage with institutional funding or specific effect-based funding. And as the last thing I'll say on this is when we're organizing it together, of course, people are already spending their money in the supermarket, at the daycare center, at the housing landlord. So maybe it's also about finding a way to offer alternatives to spend that into a food cooperative, for example, where the money keeps rotating regionally. So I think my answer is combined, that we don't need to always wait for the institutional funding while recognizing that, whoa, the action on the ground is hard and sometimes funding is needed to address overarching challenges, new innovations, and also real restoration work as well.
Yeah, just to complete, financing elements and instruments does exist. They do exist from the different also institutional partners. And I do agree with what you said, but as well, some, I don't know, larger investments are needed, and then just can necessitate the interventions of the public sector. And but I will answer just to give some time for last question, because after that one I would need to leave for another meeting. On the engagement of local communities, there are two caucuses that were created at COP16 also last time, indigenous people and local communities caucuses, and that's where farmers can get engaged. Definitely, we had a very large important delegation of farmers representative last time in the Agri-Food System Day, and we expect as well to have farmer representatives to take the floor during the Food System and Soil Health Day. So all the informations are available on the UNCCD website. Look at them and reach out to the contact point that is mentioned there to try to be part of it.
Thank you both, and it's very nice to end the session off with solutions and tangible recommendations from the both of you. So thank you for your answers. I'd like to give the floor back to Sabrina for the concluding remarks, and to thank everyone also for the questions they submitted and for being part of the webinar.
All right, thank you, Noor, for helping us through those audience questions. That brings us to the end of today's session. I want to thank Gabriel and Maarten for such an insightful conversation. Your expertise really shines through, and your passion really shines through. I know our audience has a lot to take away from today. Thank you to our audience who joined us live and submitted such great questions. It's really your participation that makes this conversation meaningful. So before we sign off, I do want to remind you how you can stay connected with the broader conversation. So we have the COP17 website at UNCCDCOP17.org. And we also have our own G20 Global Land Initiative website at g20land.org. There you can sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date. And of course, if you missed any part of today's session or you want to revisit the conversation, this will be recorded on YouTube on the G20 Land Initiative channel. It should be uploaded right after this. We hope to see you all at our next Generation Restoration Dialogue in June, where we'll be talking about the COP17 theme of water and drought. And thank you, everyone. Goodbye for now. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye. See you soon.
Many thanks. And indeed, seems lots of great people in the chat. Good luck, everybody.
Ciao,
Thank
ciao.
you.
Thank you.